G'day, and welcome to my review for The Colonel's Bequest, also known as Laura Bow 1 to some people. Now for this game I have to wind the clock all the way back to 1989. Unfortunately, the age of this game makes a lot of people not want to play it, which is a shame really, because it is actually a very good example of some quite creative game design, which in some ways was a failure, but yet at the same time was quite innovative and wasn't seen again in adventure games until Beneath the Steel Sky came out in 1994, 5 years later. And even then, to this day, very few games have attempted the kind of things that this game was trying all the way back in 1989. This makes this game very unique, and its uniqueness is why most of the old-time gamers go back and play it again, because the game design itself makes this one of the few adventure games, especially from the early adventure games, that you can play multiple times and have very different experiences in the game. So even with all its obvious flaws from its dating, most noticeably of course being the graphics and the sound, this is still a very good game and well worth a look. Now even for its day, this game was a little bit behind the times in the visuals. I mean, just compare this game to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which came out the exact same year. This by LucasArts. As you can see, Sierra was way behind the curve. To combat this, Sierra was frantically trying to finish their update to the SCI, that's the Sierra Creative Interpreter, which is the scripting engine that runs their games, to allow them to take advantage of the rapidly evolving PC power to use better multimedia. But still, they were quite behind LucasArts and Access Software. So while LucasArts was pushing for graphical superiority, Sierra was trying to fill this hole in time created by the extended development of their SCI-01 engine. They did this by slightly extending the development time of some of their titles. The idea was that through this extended development cycle, they could have a completely continuous release of games until the new engine was available, rather than having a break between them. But Sierra was still faced with the problem that their games were vastly inferior graphics and sound-wise. So they basically asked their developers to be very innovative, to try and offer something in the Sierra games that wasn't available in other titles from other companies. This gave the game designers a tremendous amount of freedom to experiment and come up with some quite interesting games. So this is what I call the experimental era for Sierra, from about 1988 to the early 90s, where they were really pushing the bounds of what an adventure game is, and this game is a product of that time. Games of note during this period of time is Manhunter New York, Conquest of Camelot, The Search for the Holy Grail, to some extent Codename Iceman, and of course the mighty Hero's Quest, also known as Quest for Glory. Now I don't really have the time to go into why all these in particular titles were so interesting. Suffice to say, they were all more than just standard adventure games. They had arcade aspects to them, they had simulation aspects to them, RPG elements, the list goes on. And what Laura's Bequest had was the very first initial steps into non-linear gameplay, something which is now so pervasive in modern gaming that if it's not there, people completely freak out and say that game is completely unplayable. It is so integral, this idea of non-linear story structuring inside games now. This is like the baby steps. This is like them seeing this potential in computers and knowing that this is where they were trying to develop, but having no real idea how to do it. So this is them trying to force this amazingly complex gaming concept into this old, out-of-date engine as an attempt to try and revitalize Sierra products so they can compete with the likes of LucasArts and Access. So how does the Colonel's Bequest go about creating this non-linear feel? Because it is actually an illusion. The game isn't non-linear, but it does do an amazing job of making you believe that it is. Okay, you play Laura Bow. Now, you have this really rich girlfriend called Lillian, and she's been invited by her uncle, who is the source of the money in her family, to attend a family gathering in which Henry, that's the uncle, announced announces a change to his will, which of course sets everyone into a tiz, and murders ensue. Cue Laura Bow, detective. Okay, so now that the stage is set, we can talk about how this game achieves this illusion of nonlinear storytelling. Basically, the entire game takes place during a single night. Now, time is visualized by this great-grandfather clock that sits in the hallway of the mansion. And here is the crux of it. Events in this game happen with or without your presence. So, as the grandfather clock advances the game time, that signifies that elsewhere in the game world, some kind of event is happening. Now, if you don't get to these events before the grandfather clock advances to the next time block, you will completely miss this event and all the information that it contains. Alternatively, you can actually interrupt these events. So instead of witnessing the entire event, your presence will actually stop the event halfway through. And the most common way this is done is by conversations. So two characters are talking, you walk into the room, they notice you, they don't want to be overheard, so they stop speaking. So this means that either by interrupting or completely missing events, you will limit the amount of information you retrieve from the game world, and thus making it more difficult to fully unravel the mystery of what is happening at this house. This core idea of time really allows them to explore some quite interesting aspects of sleuthing, and that is, most detective games rely pretty solely on questioning people, while this game is all about sneaking around and observing things, overhearing conversations, seeing how people are moving game objects around the game world, keeping an eye on small little details which change as the game time changes. And it is quite a powerful illusion as long as you actually play the game. If you're using an FAQ, the entire illusion breaks down, and that's because it's not really non-linear, it's just faking it. Take time, for example. The game provides the illusion that there's a continually running clock, and if you stand still, the entire game will happen all around you, which of course it won't. Time is actually advanced through location-based events. So you walk into a location or you use an item in a certain way, and that will advance the time. And when the time advances, all the characters and all the items shift position around the game world. And that's what creates the illusion of the game changing so much. Yet, cleverly, you can go to, say, Act 5 without seeing every single time-advancing event of Act 4. So as the time period advances, all the characters move and new events appear in different locations. But by missing events in an act, it really feels like these events are happening independently of you based upon the time, especially if you do a replay of the game and find yourself in the correct place to see an event you missed the first time around, reinforcing the feeling that these events are happening independently of you. What makes this illusion so real is the actual time you use between each increment. The more time you spend exploring, talking to people, and actually playing the game creates the illusion of time passing. And that is really what's so amazing about this game. It actually uses your own personal, real-world sense of time to create the illusion of time inside the game. Interestingly, if you actually use an FAQ, the entire illusion breaks down because the FAQ will guide you directly to the points in the game world where the events happen, which makes the entire illusion of time completely destruct. And also, you get very bad game inconsistencies where you walk out of a room and then walk back into a room and something has happened. Because when you naturally play the game and just explore, you're going to wander off elsewhere in the game world. But if you have the FAQ, you know to walk directly back into that room, thus breaking the illusion. Unfortunately, I've completely run out of time, and as try as I might, I cannot fit everything I want to say into this. There are many problems with this game, and you're going to find especially the story is a little lacking. But I strongly suggest having a playthrough, and thanks for watching.